Okay. Okay, so let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Trisha Lancey. I'm the Health Sciences and Human Services Librarian at CSU San Marcos, and I'm going to be the librarian that helps you with this particular assignment. So the class today, we're really preparing you to be able to complete your Check the Facts assignment. And this assignment is very kind of specific. It wants you to find resources that are considered popular, resources that are considered authoritative, and resources that are considered scholarly. So kind of the main point of today is being able to tell the difference between those three different types of sources and to be able to find those different types of sources. Now you can contact me by my phone. My email is probably the best. Right here, plancy@csusm.edu. You can email me at any time if you have any questions about this class or really any other class that you have. You can also use the Ask a Librarian chat box on the upper right-hand corner. Now that's gonna get you in touch with any librarian who's on call. So during the day, during normal business hours, we have a librarian physically on campus, also answering chats, answering emails, and available to talk to you over the phone. So if you forget who I am, you don't remember my email address, remember you can always go to the library website and you can talk to any librarian through that way. So just remember that that's available to you. And just to let you know, if you see me continuously looking over to the right, it's because I have a computer logged in next to me as a student, so I can actually see what you guys are seeing, because my screen looks different from your screen. So I remember I've done this before and students were like, why did you keep looking over to the right? And it's because I'm checking to make sure that you can see what I want you to see. So just don't worry about that. Okay. So I already kind of covered this a little bit. We're going to talk about the difference between popular sources, authoritative sources, and scholarly journal articles, and how to find them. And let's start talking about popular and authoritative, because those are actually the two that can be most tricky because they can be somewhat similar in ways. And remember, if you have any questions or you want me to slow down, let me know. Okay, so popular versus authoritative. Let me move this out of the way real quick. They both can come from a Google search. So when we're searching Google on whatever our topic is for the Check the Facts assignment, today I'm going to be using zinc and the common cold as my example. Whatever it is, we generally start with the Google search to learn a little bit more about it. We can find newspaper articles, magazine articles, websites, all kinds of stuff. But when we're telling the difference between something that's popular, so kind of meant for everybody, not necessarily holding any authority, versus something that's authoritative, we want to look at certain things to be able to tell the difference. Now, the first thing is the context of it and what the content actually is. So the context, what we mean is, what's the point of this information that you're looking at? Is it in order to sell you something? Is it just in order to inform you? Is it pushing a particular position or perspective? And the content, is there anything useful actually there? Or are you just looking at a website with a paragraph about zinc, and that's not very helpful? So we want to make sure there's actually enough information to be useful for us in our assignment. The second thing is the author, and this can also be tricky with websites because there's not always going to be an author. If there is an author, we can kind of evaluate whether that author has authority, right? Whether we recognize who they are or they're affiliated with some institution or something that's trustworthy. But if there is no author, that's when we kind of have to step back and look at the organization, because when there's no author, the author turns into the organization. So for example, if I am looking at an article on the Centers for Disease Control website, there may not be a specific author listed with all the information that I'm looking at. So in that sense, my author would be the Centers for Disease Control, and then I can kind of evaluate that organization to see, is this an authoritative organization? Do I recognize them? Do I trust them, etc.? Hi. So we had someone come in. Just go ahead and follow along with us from here. We're talking about your Check the Facts assignment. If you have any questions as we go through, you can go ahead and put that in the check box. chat box, excuse me. Okay, the appearance of a website is also going to tell you something about maybe not the authority, but just the trustworthiness, the feeling that you get when you look at a website, that you know that there's been effort put into it, that someone actually cares about the information that they're trying to put across, and that maybe there's some money behind it. So this is a big organization or this is a small organization. It can just give you clues and tips about the website. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we actually see an example in a little bit. Finally, the currency and date. So often there will be a date of a particular article that was posted on a certain website. And then you can see exactly when it was posted, and that's awesome because then you can evaluate, is this, in the last 3 to 5 years? Is it too old? Is it really up to date and current? But often on websites, we don't get that date. We often have to go all the way to the bottom of the website and we'll see generally a last updated year at the bottom there. So keep an eye on that to check for currency, that often it won't be super visible. You'll have to scroll down and figure out how recent it is. References, not a lot of websites have references, but some really good authoritative ones do. Not all authoritative have references, but it's kind of a good clue that they're actually putting some effort into getting you information that actually exists and they're backing it up with sources. They're not just kind of telling you their opinions. And that kind of bleeds into the idea of bias. So where is this information coming from? Is this someone's idea, their perspective, or is it something that is kind of evidence-based, that they have all these other sources that say, yes, this is true, and they provide those sources for you? And finally, the URL. This is kind of a long list we're going through. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the URL next, I believe. Oh, come on. Okay. So at the end of websites, you see the .com, the .org, the .gov, the .edu, and there's actually starting to be even more endings to URLs that are popping up. .com basically means commercial. So this is a website that was purchased to be put online. A .org often means nonprofit, but you can still buy a .org website. So I have a friend, for example, who her personal website ends with a .org. That doesn't mean she's a nonprofit. It just means it was actually a little less expensive than the .com website. .gov is a government organization, and .edu generally means that it's associated with an educational institution. But again, there are blogs, professors' blogs, student blogs that could potentially end with .edu that may not be that authoritative. It may be just someone's opinion. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Right now, what we're trying to do is kind of distinguish between the different sources so that we can identify what those different sources are. You're going to be able to find those sources, some of them through the library website, through the databases, and that's really going to be the scholarly articles. But for the websites, when you're talking about the difference between popular websites and authoritative websites, that's mostly going to come from a Google search, which is why we're kind of going through the backdrop of this right now. Does that make sense? Not all of them, not all of them. So again, when we're looking for scholarly sources, which we're going to get to by the end of this little meeting we have today, the scholarly sources are some of what's in the library databases, but not necessarily everything we have in the library databases. Those aren't all necessarily scholarly. So we have to kind of figure out how to look at them and see, oh, this is scholarly because it has all these things and I can tell and all this kind of stuff. So we are going to figure that out by the end, don't worry. Okay, so the URLs basically are just a tip for giving us more information about a particular website. Oops. Now that's the last slide I'm going to show you before we switch to a demo so we can actually see an example of a popular and an authoritative website. So your screen might do a little bit of changing right now. Let's see. Oops. Okay. And now I am going to go ahead and share a popular website with you. So remember my topic, there we go. My topic is zinc and the common cold. So when I'm searching, a lot of different things will come up. A lot of it will be authoritative, but I will get some stuff that's not quite so authoritative. So here is an example of something that's probably considered a popular source. Now let's kind of go through the checks of what we were talking about just a second ago on that slide about, you know, being able to tell if these things are authoritative. So first, the appearance. Immediately looking at this, I want to make sure I can see the chat box before I move on too much. Where's our chat box? Okay, there we are. Okay, the first thing I see here is the appearance. So it kind of looks a little bit old, and often when we look at old websites, that generally means that maybe someone's just not paying attention to the website anymore, or they're not updating it, or it's not affiliated with a big trustworthy organization. Potentially, it just gives us kind of a hint about what's going on. The second thing I notice is on the right here, I see some ads. So get this book, some advertisements, and they kind of go all the way down. An antiperspirant specifically made by the people who make this website, which is a little bit strange. So those are kind of things to pay attention to that kind of let you know, like maybe this website isn't necessarily the best website. And now let's find out a little bit more information about what's actually written here, the content. So why zinc should be taken daily and how not all zinc supplements are created equal, and how not all zinc, okay. So I get what they're trying to say there. We do have an author. It's just someone's name. Sarah is the author. We don't really have any affiliation other than this website. So we're not, you know, informed that she has a PhD or that she works in a certain area or that she has, you know, she's authored other books. It's just her name. So that kind of tells us it's a non-credentialed author. It's just somebody giving us information about this topic. Now, if we look up at the top, and let's see, yeah, you can see the URL. It is a .org, and this is a really good example of what I said before. I'm pretty sure this is not a nonprofit website, but they do have a .org ending. So it kind of does tell you like, okay, so this obviously isn't a nonprofit. I might have to search around and make sure that's true, but I kind of have a feeling it's not. So the .org doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be trustworthy. And now, if I look real quick, and I just kind of scan through some of the information, I can tell that this is probably written for the general public. If zinc was given to every mother-to-be, then a large portion of birth abnormalities could be avoided. It's written in language that is very understandable for the general population. And some of the language is a little bit emotional. So let's say pharmacists and doctors alike glorify zinc supplementation. So that's very kind of creative language that generally you don't see in like the more technical, just information websites. Also, when we scroll down to not all zinc is created equal, we do see, I remember there being something, here it is. This is a dirty industry secret, and sunscreens are the main reason why sunlight has been falsely maligned to cause skin cancer. So that's kind of a weird sounding sentence. And saying something's a dirty industry secret, that gives me the kind of feeling that this is more of a blog, that this is more of someone telling me their opinion. Now let's scroll down to the bottom and see if there's any references, if they're backing up any of this information with sources. They have related articles, but they're really not that related. And then there's comments, but there's no references, so they're not really telling us why we should take this information as truth. They're not giving us a backup, giving us references. And if I look at these comments, I can see they start in 2010, and this Sarah person responded to something in 2010. But since then, there was a comment in 2013 and 2015, and another in 2015, but none of them have been responded to by the author. So that gives me a feeling that the author hasn't really been back to this page, paying attention to it or updating it. And if I scroll all the way down, I want to see if there's any information about a date. Okay, so they say copyright 2007 and 2015. Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Sofal. So sometimes the website will just basically tell you, you know, how long the website's been on or up, but that doesn't really tell me whether or not someone's been back since 2010. So it gives us some information, but not a whole lot. Okay, so this is a good example of what I would call a popular website. Now, if you were trying to figure out if something was popular, you could look at, you know, the about section of a web page. This one doesn't actually have an about section. It just has a contact us, and that is another thing that kind of tips me off. Like, this probably isn't authoritative, because most authoritative websites will give you information about their website and, you know, what organization they're related to. Yes, just I'm going to be sending her the information about who's attending, because I can see all of you in the chat box. And also by the end of this session, you guys are going to have a link for a survey and the link for the quiz that you're going to get points for. So that's how she'll know, basically by me telling her and by you doing that quiz. Okay, so that's enough for the popular site. Let's jump to something that would be considered more authoritative. On the same topic, so we're still talking about zinc and the common cold. Let's see. Okay, we're at 8:18. We're doing pretty good. So this is obviously a very different website, but it's still a website. I can see the appearance is a little bit cleaner, and as I scroll down, I can see that the website is broken up into these different categories that I can kind of jump to. So what is it? How effective is it? And on and on and on. So there's a lot of information here that looks pretty helpful. Now, I don't see any ads at the moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean a website's bad. Often good authoritative websites also have ads. You just kind of have to look at how many there are, if they're jumping out at you and blinking and all that kind of stuff. Often authoritative websites might have an ad or two, but they're going to be hidden and small, and they won't be quite as disruptive. Now, the author. This is another example of what I was talking about before, but there might not be an author, because this might be something that a group of people put together for this organization. So I don't see an author in the beginning, and I'm just going to quickly jump down to the end. Sorry about this. All right. And I don't see any author towards the end either. So there's no author. So in this case, when we're judging whether something is reliable, whether the author is reliable or credible, we wouldn't be looking at the person's name, we would be looking at the organization. So is Medline Plus, this website, going to be reliable? And part of that is kind of looking for clues about what is sponsoring this website. And I can see up here the NIH, US National Library of Medicine. So just the fact that this stuff is up here on this website tells me that Medline Plus is part of the National Institute of Health, which is part of the US National Library of Medicine. So that's pretty good for me. I know about the National Institute of Health. I know it's part of the government. And I think that often, because the government has a pretty high visibility, they generally have a lot of checks on the information that they provide to the general public. So I just get a feeling from this organization that this is probably going to be good, trustworthy information. Okay. Now, if we look at the way stuff is written down here, now obviously we're not going to read this entire thing because it's pretty long, but I can tell that it's written for the general public, but I don't see any like emotional language or journalistic language. I see it's very clear, it's understandable. It's a little bit technical, you know, it might be a little bit boring, but it's supposed to be boring because they're supposed to be providing us good information. It's also in depth, so we know because it's so long. And if we check towards the very end, I think you guys already saw this. If we scroll all the way down again, we can see that there's a big section of references. Now, not all websites are going to have this. This is kind of like a really good example of an authoritative website. They give us really in-depth, great information, and they're providing us where that information came from. So it's it's really kind of up there on the level of websites. But this is still a website. This isn't a scholarly article, which is what we're going to get into next. This is the popular and the authoritative are kind of blended in the sense that they can both be found through a Google search, and they're both generally considered to be websites. They're not articles published in journals. And for the last thing, let's check the date. Let's see when this was last updated. Here we go. Last reviewed February 14th, 2015. So I know that this is current, that they've looked at this, that they're not just ignoring this web page, people are checking up on it. So this is kind of what we want to see. You want something at least within the last 5 years, if not more recent. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we move on, just on the difference between popular and authoritative? So for this particular assignment, for Check the Facts, Lee wants you to have a popular source, I believe, a popular source, an authoritative source, and a scholarly source. So you need to have a popular and an authoritative. And so part of this is just being able to tell which is which, right? Yes, I believe all three. She wants you to be able to tell. I think so. And that's also going to be on your assignment. This is what the assignment's been in the past. I don't think she's changed it much. But it is my understanding you need one popular, one authoritative, and one scholarly. Does anyone have any other questions about popular and authoritative before we move on? Nope. Awesome. So we're going to skip back to the PowerPoint. Stick with me here. Share new window. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to talk about scholarly. And the reason I talk about scholarly on its own, kind of separate from popular and authoritative, is because it's really a totally different beast. It's not a website. A scholarly article is not a website put together by people and then just put online. A scholarly article is an article that is published in an actual physical journal or possibly an online journal. But it's considered an article, a journal article. Often when you search in the library databases, what you're actually searching is scanned PDFs of these scholarly articles. So they're not themselves websites. They're just articles that are available to be viewed online. I hope that makes sense. Although sometimes you can find them through Google searches, but again, they're often going to be PDFs. And we're going to be able to tell by the way that they look, by the way that they're formatted, that these are scholarly articles. Peer-reviewed. So when we talk about scholarly, basically what we're saying is that this is a peer-reviewed journal article. And let me give you an example of why that's so important. So say I want to publish my research in the Journal of Library Science, which is a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. I would do my research, I would write up my journal article, and then I would submit it to the journal. They would then take my name off of it, and they'd send it to 5 or 6 other scholars in my field that study a very similar thing that I study. And those 4 or 5 people, 5 or 6, however many it is, will make notes all over my manuscript. They're going to say, you know, you're not really supporting your point enough here, or this doesn't make sense, or your data doesn't match what you're saying in your conclusion. They would really try to find problems in my paper. I would then get that paper back, and I would have to make all those changes, or at least address everything that those peer reviewers said about my paper in order to get it published. Now, it seems simple enough, but actually, I think only 3 out of 10 articles that get submitted to peer-reviewed journals actually get published. So 7 out of 10 just get outright denied, and they say, nope, it's not good enough to be published in this journal. So that's what makes scholarly articles so much different from websites, newspaper articles, magazine articles, because those things don't go through this peer review process. These journals, these articles often reflect new ideas or original research, or maybe a new way of looking at existing research. So it's a contribution to the field. It's not just copying what's already been done. And it's written by scholars and for scholars. So researchers aren't writing these articles with the general public in mind. They don't really care if it's difficult to read because they're not writing it for the general public. They're writing it for scholars, so other researchers, other professors, other doctors, students like you, student scholars. That's why they're actually writing these. Yes, so we're going to be finding scholarly articles through the library website, which is what we're going to be getting to in just a second. So that's where we would kind of pull in the library website. Okay. Now let's take a look before we jump into the databases at what these scholarly articles look like and how we can kind of tell that something is scholarly. Now this is just an example of the first page of an online scholarly article. So this is actually an online journal. PLOS ONE is freely available online, but it's also a physical journal. We can see that the title is a little bit boring and kind of hard to read. Solution structure of the 2A protease from a common cold agent, human rhinovirus C2. So these are the kind of titles that we're going to see in scholarly articles. We can also see all these individuals' names here who are all authors of this article. So this is a kind of team that worked together to do this research and write this research article. And we can also see right below their names the institutions that they're affiliated with. So we can automatically tell these people want us to know who they are. And you're always going to see authors and their associations on a scholarly article because they want you to know. And there's going to be an abstract. So a little summary before you get into the article that tells you what the whole article is about. Most scholarly articles will contain an abstract. Okay. So I'm just going to show you some examples because we'll be able to see more once we actually get into the databases. So I'm going to get out of this again. We're not going to go to the summary yet. And I'm going to share a new screen with you. Okay, so now here we are, finally at the library website. I promised you we would make it there. And this is where you're going to want to start when you're searching for scholarly articles. Okay, so for this particular assignment, I'm going to tell you to go to your course guide. So this is generally where you could just search for scholarly articles, just in our databases in general. You could also pick specific databases, but you guys actually have a course guide specifically for this class, and you can access it right here. Let's see. So I'm going to give you some information to do APA citations, but if you have any questions about APA citations, you can always email me, absolutely. And we can set up an appointment if you kind of want to meet in person. But often, if you have a question about something, I can give you some initial feedback through email, and then we can kind of meet if you want to work more on it together. Okay? Okay, so we're in course guides. I'm going to go to kinesiology, because this is kinesiology 306. And here's your course guide. And this is going to have a lot of information for, doing your APA citation, search tips, where you can search, types of sources. I'm obviously going to skip types of sources because that's what we've been talking about most of the day so far. I'm going to go to the where to search because we want to find scholarly articles at this point. Now I'm going to search in Academic Search Premier because it's a really broad multidisciplinary database. And I highly recommend that you search in Academic Search Premier as well as maybe Google Scholar to figure out what literature is out there on your topic. Now remember, when you go to Google Scholar, to always enter through the library website. So click on this link to get there. If you don't, if you just go to Google Scholar through Google, it won't recognize that you're a student at CSU San Marcos with access to all the stuff that we have access to. So it won't provide you those get it at CSUSM links. So just remember to always start at the library website, even if you are going to use Google Scholar. Okay, so Academic Search Premier. And now I'm going to do just a basic search because I'm doing the common cold. So I'm going to type common cold and zinc. So I put in the and because I want all the articles that talk about the common cold and all the articles that talk about zinc, just where they overlap. I don't want everything. So it's going to make my search a little bit more narrow. So I get 262. I'm actually going to make this even more narrow by putting quotes around the common cold. And that'll make sure that just the articles that say that phrase in that order, common cold, are included, not other articles that might be just saying the word cold or saying the word common anywhere in the article. Okay, so I lost about 60 articles, but that's okay. I still have 201. And now there are filters on the left that can help you kind of narrow in on what you're looking for. So right here we see scholarly peer-reviewed journals. So I'm going to narrow by that. And that brings me from 201 to 76. So we lost 124 articles. But most of these should be scholarly. Now that's not always the case. I'm going to show you an example where that doesn't work. But most of them at least should be scholarly. I can also change the publication date. So say I only want within the last 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years. I can drag this all the way up to say 2010. And that brings me from 76 to only 19. So it's getting more and more narrow as I put these filters on to kind of focus in on what kind of literature I'm actually looking for. So let's take a look at some of these. On this first one, this is a meta-analysis. So it's kind of like a systematic review of the literature about zinc lozenges and their effects on the common cold. So these are really good articles. Although they are kind of considered not original research, but not really, they're good. You could definitely use these kinds of systematic reviews. So let's just click this PDF full text, and it'll show us an example of what these scholarly articles look like. So we see that this is the journal. We see that this is the title. Here are the author names. Here's the abstract. And if we scroll down, we can see there's a full list of author information at the end of the article. That's actually probably too small for you to see, but there's going to be a lot of information for us here. And they're breaking things up by background and methods. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see that there is a whole lot of references. So this whole page is references and part of this page. So there's a lot of references, and this is something that all scholarly articles will have. So let's go back and let's see what else we can find here. That was just accessing the PDF by clicking on this PDF button. Now let's see, number 2, this one doesn't have the PDF button. It has a Get It button. So if I click on the Get It, it's going to try to find the article in some other place in the library. So it says we do have the full text PDF, but we have to get it here at PubMed Central. So if I click PubMed Central, it should, yes, bring me to the article. And here's the full text. I can click the PDF right here in the upper right-hand corner. Oh, this might not show. So there is the PDF available. I'm going to share the new window real quick just to show you what popped up, because you can't see on my screen. But here is the full text PDF of the article. Now I'm going to go back. Okay. So in the library website, this is a question, will we be able to find all 3 types of articles through the library's website? You can find popular sources on the library website, so like newspaper articles, magazine articles, all that stuff you could potentially find through the library website. So if I didn't narrow by scholarly, some of what might have come up is like newsletters, newspaper articles, and those would be considered popular. So you could find different kinds of sources on the library website, and just like as if you found them on Google, from a Google search, you're going to have to kind of figure out, is this an authoritative source or is this a popular source, based on all those things that we talked about earlier. So the context, the content, whether or not the authors are reliable or trustworthy, whether or not they're kind of backing up their information. So you could potentially find all this stuff on the library website as well. Okay. Okay. So let's go back. No, there's no button to narrow by popular, although let's see what we can do here. If we get rid of scholarly, and we can kind of look on the left here and see the source types. So for example, magazine articles are generally going to be popular sources. So if I clicked on this, only magazine articles would show up, and often these would be popular sources. For authoritative, you're going to have to actually look at the source and figure out if it's authoritative based on the stuff that we talked about before. So we can't really narrow by authoritative or popular in that sense. We have to kind of make the decision based on the actual piece of information, based on kind of evaluating it on all these different levels. Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the scholarly. Narrowing again. I just want to make sure that you're able to find these sources for yourself. So we did the Get It button there. And let's actually take a look at one other one. Let's see. Let's just look. Okay, I'll go to the next page and see what's there. Okay, so this looks like a very, very scholarly article, probably in the sciences. And if I click just on the title, I want to show you the other kind of options you have. So before I just clicked on the Get It button or I clicked on the PDF. But if we actually look at the actual item itself, the metadata for the item, we can see it lists all the authors, the journal title. This will help you in your citations. It'll also give you the abstract, so you can kind of tell if this is going to be useful before you try to get the article. And the DOI down there at the bottom. It also gives you all these tools on the right-hand side. So you can email yourself, you can give yourself the permalink. So the permalink will just bring you back to this page no matter where you are. You just may have to log in with your CSUSM login credentials if you're off campus. It also gives you an option for citations. So there's lots of different citation styles. Here's the APA citation. But often these citations have issues. So while it's helpful to kind of use this maybe as a starting point, you still want to compare it to a good example from one of the resources I'm going to show you in a little bit, just to make sure everything is correct. Because for example, for this one, there's no hanging indent. Hanging indents are needed. And I can't see anything else, but I would have to kind of double check to make sure all the information is correct. Okay, so if I try to get this one, let's see what happens. This one we actually don't own at the library, but you can still get the item. So it says no full text available, but we can still request this item through interlibrary loan. So I would click here, I'd sign in with my CSUSM information, I'd click continue because I've been here before, and it automatically fills in all the information in order to submit an interlibrary loan request. If I scroll all the way down, I would just submit it, and in about 2 days, interlibrary loan would send me an email with a link to the full text PDF, and then I could save that full text to the computer. So even if we don't have something in full text, you can generally find it just by submitting an ILL request. Okay, and now I want to show you one last thing, and this is just kind of show us why we need to check to make sure that our sources are scholarly. So before I do that, I'm going to remind us again of what a scholarly article looks like, how it's generally very long, 7 to 15 pages. It has an abstract. It has a background section. It has a method section most of the time, not always, but it's generally broken up into sections so that the reader can kind of tell where the author is going with their point. A results section, there's going to be charts and graphs. It's generally pretty boring looking. There's not any color anywhere. Let's see. And this one's 11 pages. So this is a good example of a scholarly article. Now, if we go back and we look at one of these, and remember, I narrowed by scholarly. So supposedly these should all be scholarly articles, but this, just the title doesn't seem scholarly to me. Update from the cold front, there's no cure in sight, but there do seem to be ways to make the common cold less common. That doesn't sound like a scholarly article title to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at the PDF. And I can already tell that this isn't scholarly. Part of it is because I see color, I see a little image, I don't see an abstract. And if I scroll down, I don't see any references either. This is just like one page long. Oops. The second page actually isn't any of the text. It ends here. So this is from Harvard Health Letter. So it's just like a newsletter article, okay? So this isn't a scholarly article, but we have to kind of keep an eye out for these kinds of things because this kind of stuff can pop up pretty easily. Okay, so that's how you find scholarly articles. I do recommend that you use Academic Search Premier, either this or Google Scholar, but Academic Search Premier, you have more ability to use these filters to have only the most recent stuff and to limit by scholarly or peer-reviewed. Okay, so let's do a very quick recap, and then we're going to be wrapping up. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, so quick recap. So popular sources. Often there's pictures, they're pretty easy to read, they're written for the general public, and they're often written by journalists or non-experts. So remember that example written by Sarah. She didn't really give us any credentials, she just put her name as Sarah, so we know she's either a journalist or a non-expert. There often won't be any references, and there can sometimes be just opinion and unsupported facts. Next. Oops. Now, authoritative sources generally have more technical and professional language. They're still written for the general public, but often they're going to be written by experts, so people who kind of know what they're doing. Sometimes they're supported with references, not always, but more often than popular sources would be. And they generally come from a recognizable and trusted source. And finally, scholarly journal articles. These are articles that are published in academic journals. They're peer-reviewed, they're written for scholars, by scholars, and you can kind of tell by the language that they use and often by the titles of the scholarly articles. They're going to have a lot of references, generally a page or more, and they are generally 7 to 15 pages long, so they're pretty long. You're not going to find a 1-page or 2-page scholarly article, so keep that in mind when you're searching. Okay, I think that's it. I kind of just jumped through those really quick. I'm going to take a second here to see if you guys have any questions, and then we're going to jump into the survey, and finally I'm going to give you the link for your quiz, and we're going to be done. So does anyone have any questions at this point? No questions? Okay. So one quick thing before we get out of this entirely. I just realized I need to show you guys the resources for APA citations because that's going to be kind of a big deal when you guys are putting together your citations. Which of the three is most trustworthy? Scholarly. Scholarly is the top. And then authoritative is okay. It's you know, it's not at the level of scholarly because authoritative sources are not peer reviewed, but they have generally very good information put together by experts. Popular is just anything written by anyone. So it kind of goes scholarly at the top, authoritative, popular. Okay. I'm going to go back to our guide. Any suggestions for the quiz? It's just going to be kind of based on what we talked about today. So everything that I said today about, being able to tell the difference between popular and authoritative, that's mostly what it's going to be. It's going to be, is this a popular source or is it an authoritative source? And just kind of keep in mind all the stuff that we talked about today, and you should do just fine. I'm going back to the course guides right now, to our Kinesiology 306 guide, to show you the APA citations, or the sources for APA citations. Okay. Okay, so the very first one is a resource from Purdue OWL, and it's a reference list for online sources. All the sources that you guys are getting for this Check the Facts are going to be probably online. So this is a really good resource to kind of check your information with. So we have an example from an online periodical. So what I like about this, let me make it bigger for you, is that it shows us, it shows us the information that should be there, and then it shows us an actual example. Now here's online scholarly journal articles, and here are some examples down here. I really like examples. I like to be able to see a good one and then compare what I have. Maybe I pulled it from the database, maybe I pulled it from some other feature, or I used NightCite or Noodlebib to kind of put the citation together, but then I want to check to make sure everything's correct. And that's when something like this would be very helpful. You just check to make sure it looks the same. And if we keep scrolling, there's going to be help too with newspaper articles, book chapters, I want to find just websites. Here we go. Web document or report, author, data publication, title, retrieved by, and the URL. So this page will help you put together the citations for all of your sources, really. But again, if you have questions, you can always let me know. And you can feel free to kind of go through this on your own as well. Yeah, I think this is a very good site for double checking your sources. So if you kind of put what you have from the database next to one of these examples for a scholarly article, say, it'll help you make sure that you have all the stuff correct in your citations. So I would definitely use these resources to check your work. Okay, back over. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick survey, and this is just a survey about the class today. It's going to take you 2-3 minutes. I'm actually going to put it in this box here so you can just click on it. So it's in the chat box right now if you want to click on it. And we're just going to take a 2 minutes, 3 minutes for you guys to give me some feedback. Now I've been offering this online for just a couple semesters now, so I like to get any feedback about the online format. If anything was annoying you or something going on with the tech, let me know. It's really helpful. Well, thank you very much. But any feedback to improve it is awesome. So in about 2 minutes, we're going to switch over and you're going to have the link to the quiz. Yeah, if it's a link you can click, you can just go ahead and click on it. If it doesn't let you click it for some reason, you can just type it into your browser. Either way. I try to make it short enough that if something doesn't work, you can just type it into your browser. Yeah, sometimes whenever I switch over to something else, it'll just automatically put you into full screen. So sorry about that. It can make it difficult. The quiz will probably, shouldn't be longer than 20 minutes. What it's going to have you do is it's going to have you look at 4 different sources, and it's going to ask you questions about those sources. And then at the end, it's going to say, okay, well, now that you've answered all these questions about it, what do you think this is, popular, authoritative, or scholarly? So it shouldn't take you too long. I would recommend it just doing it right now, just kind of while everything's fresh in your head. Okay, so I bet everyone's done with this survey by now, so let's switch over. This is going to be the quiz link. I'm going to, again, put it in the chat box. You don't have to do the quiz right now. No, you just have the one try. And it's due Wednesday by midnight. Wednesday by midnight, so you have some time to do it. But, you know, it's not going to be anything out of nowhere. It's basically what we've been talking about a lot today. And remember, as you're doing this assignment, if you have any questions about the difference between a popular or authoritative source or a scholarly source, feel free to email me at plancy, it's on there, at csusm.edu, and I can always kind of give you some feedback. But remember, just take a look at what I feel like sometimes students forget is the content, what's actually in the website, in the article, what they're saying, and make sure that what they're saying is useful, right? So not only that it's from, you know, a reliable organization or a reliable person, but also are they giving you good information, something that's usable in your project or something that could be helpful to your readers when you do your Check the Facts assignment. So keep that stuff in mind. Also, you know, if they're kind of providing you with more than just opinion or what they think about a certain topic. Okay, so that's your quiz, and that's basically it. So we're done today. Thank you guys so much for waking up a little bit early, but I think this will really help you guys with your assignment. And of course, always remember that I'm always available if you have any questions or anything you need. I did just put it in the chat box. Do you see it up there? It's the tiny URL. Can we see it in the chat box? Okay, awesome. That's okay. So you should have all the links that you need, and good luck, you guys. If you have any other questions, I'm probably just going to stick around in this room for the next 5 minutes until 9 o'clock. So if you have any other questions, anything you want to say before you head out, then I'm going to be here. But otherwise, you can exit the room by clicking the Leave Meeting button. I think it might be in your bottom right-hand corner. All right. Have a good day, you guys. Okay. Thanks. It's not timed, no.